good trip home. We were able to take a couple days off here in Saturday and Sunday, and then jump back into preparation and get ready for Illinois. I'm proud of the way the guys played. Um, not perfect by any stretch, but I thought we really battled and competed and made runs when we needed to and got contributions after going through the film, just like I thought live. A lot of help from different areas, which is what we need as we go forward. You got to continue to have all hands on deck and take contributions from wherever we can. But so getting ready for Illinois, really good team. Watching them last night, I know Purdue struggled offensively, but a different feel with the two big guys together, and then obviously the maturation of Frazier and Io in the backcourt and the improvement of Griffin. He's playing really well. So, like I said, this league is not for the faint of heart, as we've all seen. So it's get ready for another grinder on Wednesday night.
Jeff.
Greg, I'm guessing you're not surprised by what Tyler has given you as the season's gone on. We talked to you before Christmas, and you said he needed to slow down. Has he been doing that lately, and has that led to fewer mistakes, a little more consistent contribution?
Yeah, I think, the first possession that he touched the ball Friday night was not slowing down, and hence he got himself in a little trouble with the travel. But, yeah, I think I'd rather have him that way, and we can try to harness him a little bit than us have to constantly invigorate him. We don't have to worry about him coming in terms of the effort he made big plays. A couple steals he got, one on the out of bounds play, one he stole in front of their bench. Obviously the offensive rebound at the end, but there were other plays he made. The reverse layup he made over two guys. I think he's just getting more and more comfortable, and the kid's a heck of a player. He's got to get stronger, and that'll come in time. But his instincts and his IQ level and his fearlessness, I think those, and he's longer than I think people realize. I've noticed that just watching him in practice defensively. Hand-eye coordination is really good. So, like I said, he's still scratching the surface and is really young in terms of his college career, but just understands what his role is with this group and what this group needs from him, and he's done a good job of producing that.
Zach, Greg, I know it's only been 4 games so far, and maybe the numbers don't jump out at you stat sheet wise, but Micah Potter, where has he helped you? Which different areas has he helped you guys so far?
Well, it's a big body, obviously, with the size. That's a given. But he's had some experience, so it's not like you're throwing in somebody new that hasn't played. If it was a freshman per se, or even somebody that had transferred from a different league. You have somebody that's played in every arena, started in every arena. I think I don't know how much. I think he had 16 starts at Ohio State, and he got to all the arenas, but he's played in all of them. So he's not overwhelmed by the environment. Obviously, Friday was a little different, a little more emotional, just because of going back to Ohio State. But he handled it. He handled it very maturely, like he has everything else. But I think the biggest thing is not so much in the numbers that's going to jump off the stat sheet, but you watch Reavers' minutes have gone down, but his production has gone up. So it's helped take some of the pressure off and the workload off of Nate. And I think they've, starting, Mike is still very early in terms of being comfortable with everything, and defensively too. It's going to take some time for him to get in sync with everybody, and obviously you're not going to have a lot of experimental time right now because there's the competition level that we were going to face, or are facing. But I think the biggest thing is just the experience that he brings, and the fact that he can, help keep Nate fresher.
Jim,
Greg, you said the other night in Columbus that Brevin will oftentimes make suggestions on stuff based on what he sees. How is that something you notice about him right away? Is just his basketball IQ and just his ability to think through the game has been pretty high?
Yeah, he's always had that ability. He has a great feel for the game. He senses things on the floor. So I think it's something, it's a lot of times it's come from him being on the floor and just understanding or getting a feel for how a team is playing him per se, or he can tell by he's the most active cutter we have. So he a lot of times will sense what's going on as he's making his routes through the paint or off screens and those type of things. And we've had other players that have had that type of ability to kind of sniff that stuff out, and it would understand what they were talking about when they came to the huddle, and that it made sense. So, but Brevin is definitely, like I said, from a basketball IQ standpoint and how he reads things ahead of time. He does it at a pretty high level.
Greg, I think you mentioned after the game, maybe on your post-game radio show, that even when you guys weren't winning, still maybe in November, you saw some signs of progress. What signs did you see before you guys started winning that, okay, we're making some progress and we'll get there eventually?
Well, I think the one thing was that defensively we were pretty good, and that was what I was worried about, probably more so coming off last year than how we were going to replace that experience of Happ and Iverson. And I thought we were good enough defensively, and I think there was only through a stretch. I haven't looked at the numbers back that far lately, but there was only one team that had gotten over a point per possession. That was Green Bay at one point. And we had lost games by keeping teams under one, which is always the benchmark. So it was a matter of getting better at taking care of the ball. And then obviously we had some abnormal offensive nights shooting the ball. Specifically, New Mexico is probably the one that jumps out the most. That just was rock bottom. But and we could overcome that because I knew we had good shooters and guys that could score. We had to stay true to what we were going to be defensively, get better at being more physical, and take care of the glass on the defensive end. And like I said, I think Micah's addition has helped a little bit of that just from an emotional standpoint. But we've also gotten even better defensively. And then when you get shots to go in, obviously you become that much more dangerous. But I think the biggest thing that I saw back then is that they were bought in defensively. They knew and understood and embraced how important that end of the floor was, and we'll iron out and improve in those other areas once we get situated.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Coach, circling back to Tyler for a minute, you mentioned the fearlessness in him. Is that particularly impressive for a young kid like that, going after some of those big plays in a big game like that?
Yeah, although I think if you watched him when he was younger in high school, that he had those same type of traits. And we've had others that have that mentality about him. Showalter had that. Gosser had that. Davison has that. The moment isn't too big for them, and they understand the other little things they can do that maybe don't show up on a stat sheet or don't get written about heavily, and how they can help their teams. And that's what I mentioned earlier about him understanding what his role is. That's his role right now on this team. Will it grow and evolve as he goes through his career? Probably. But right now, the best way he can help the team is what you saw Friday night.
Jeff. Greg, forgetting points for a second, what has Davison been doing lately to help you guys win?
I think one thing is he's understood that he doesn't have to do everything, and there are other guys that can step up and score and just take what the defense gives him. I think he's done a better job of not over-penetrating, driving himself into trouble. He's taking shots when they're there. I think the biggest thing about Brad, and that's why I put him back in late Friday night, was, he's the mortar between the bricks, so to speak. He's our glue. His voice on the floor is really audible. I could hear it Friday night. He was calling out things as Ohio State, kind of quarterbacking our defense, so to speak. And I felt, just had a gut instinct down the stretch of that game, that we were going to need that type of vocal leadership on the floor. And whether he produced in numbers or not was really irrelevant. That I needed him kind of spearheading the charge from a leadership standpoint and a vocal standpoint. And obviously other guys were able to step up and make plays and get rebounds and those type of things. But like I said, he kind of, I think he's understood and embraced that role of, I don't have to, it's been a transformation because, as a freshman, he had to shoot the ball a lot, even with one arm, because we were just, didn't have a lot of bullets in the gun, so to speak. And I think he's been slowly readjusting to not having to do that all the time. And when he has a good shot, take it, but we don't have to force things.
Jim.
Greg, I think you'd agree that you probably could still take care of the ball better, and you'll go through long stretches where you do take care of the ball, but then there's these clumps where you don't. What do you notice about those stretches where cause it's not one person, and
Right.
It just seems to kind of be contagious almost.
Right. And Friday was right at the start. I don't know. We've had different suggestions from let's scrimmage before the game to get that out of us to, I don't know, one less glass of Powerade before you come back out. I think the one thing is slowing down. Some of their time, Tyler's turnover was just trying to play too fast in the moment. finally got to one point in time, and we were talking about something offensively to run, and I said, hey, let's just start with not throwing it to the guys in the white jersey. That'll be the first good step we can take. And once we settled in, I think that after that first media timeout was just we talked more about just settle down. We've withstood a punch. Let's keep. I think at that point it was maybe 9-6 or something like that. Let's just settle in, or maybe it was 9-0, but let's just settle down a little bit. We'll be okay. But yeah, I mean, we'll keep searching for why it's happening in those situations, specifically at the start of a game, and see if we can get it resolved.
Jeff?
Obviously, you don't game plan to fall behind 7-0, but are you encouraged by the fact that the 2 road victories have been completely different in how they played out? Tennessee was jump on top, hold it.
Right.
Ohio State had to come back twice.
Well, I think one of the things that's improved with this group since November and December is the resiliency and the ability to handle adversity. Early, we get a little bit of turbulence, rock the boat, and we didn't respond well. And I think now they've understood, hey, just like I mentioned just in the last question, settle down. So we're okay. Let's just calm down here and play our game and chip away and get ourselves back in this, and we'll be okay. So they've done a good job of commanding that themselves. They talk about that in the huddles. I don't have to say it as much as I used to earlier in the year, so they understand it. When they recognize it and can talk about it before a coach has to say it, that's a good sign.
Coach, to string off the 4 straight wins and finally get the monkey off your back for the road wins too, how important is it, and how have you seen the shift from your players that you have 3 games, well, you have Illinois, then 3 ranked games coming up after that?
Well, we just operate one game at a time. It'll be today's preparation for Illinois, and whatever happens after Wednesday, we'll worry about that on Thursday. So I think anytime you start looking too far ahead, you get yourself overwhelmed, and there's no purpose. There's only one person that can look further ahead, and that's whoever has the Penn State scout. And I'm not sure which assistant has it, so I don't ask until after the Illinois game. I'll say, all right, who has Penn State, and then I'll get the lowdown. But if you get caught up trying to look at the big chunk altogether, first of all, it's going to be very overwhelming. But secondly, there's no point in looking at and rankings. Really, they don't get to start with the lead. Like they don't get like 10-0 lead if you're ranked in the top 5, or a 5-0 lead you're ranked in the top 20. So that's for all you people to make a big deal about.
Does Illinois, have they changed the way they defend? Because they've been pressure, and
Right.
now, what is that going to present any different challenges, or just a little adjustment to make?
Yeah, they don't. Obviously, I think the pressure within a certain area is still the same, but not maybe extended as much. They're not putting teams at the free throw line as much. Obviously, not fouling as much. Personnel maybe has something to do with that too. I don't know. I haven't called Brad and asked him. I just look at the tape and say, hey, they're. But with having Kofi and Georgie together, they can play those 2 bigs. But also I think they obviously have seen what is consistently successful in the league, and there are a lot of good coaches do that. They adapt and adjust based on where they are in the environment they're in. He's not the first one that's done it. Beeline did it too when he was at Michigan. So each league is different, has a different personality, a different flavor, so to speak, and different recipe for success.